My parents sold my childhood. Home without telling me so, I bought it back under a fake name and evicted them. When their lease ended, I've always been the dependable one, the kid who fixed everything my parents broke. If a pipe burst, I was there with a wrench. If bills piled up, I'd quietly wire money. It wasn't even a question. I just did what needed to be done. That's what being the good son meant in my family. You carried the weight. No one else wanted to touch. Our house was small, chipped paint, creaky floors, a stubborn front door that never shut right, but it was home. Every nail, every dent in the wall had a story behind it. My dad taught me carpentry there. I still remember the smell of sawdust mixing with my mom's cinnamon pies on Saturday mornings. She'd hum old country songs while rolling dough. He'd whistle from the garage, working on some half-finished shelf. Those sounds were my childhood soundtrack, messy, imperfect, safe. When I moved out for work at 24, it felt like tearing off a piece of myself. The city was louder, cleaner, faster, but it never felt like home. Still, every month, I'd send money back just to help out, I'd say, pretending it didn't sting when they rarely said thank you. My mom would brush it off with, "Oh, honey. You know, we appreciate you," and my dad would joke, "Guess we raised a provider." They'd tell me stories about leaky roofs, broken fences, and how hard it was keeping the place running. I believed every word. In my head, that house was still our family's heart, something I was helping preserve. I didn't know it then, but I was clinging to an illusion, to walls that didn't belong to the family I thought I had, and soon I'd learn just how easily something sacred could be sold. It happened on a quiet Saturday morning. I'd driven 3 hours back to my hometown, excited to surprise my parents. I hadn't been home in nearly a year, and something in me craved that old feeling, the smell of fresh-cut grass, the creak of the front steps, the warmth that used to feel like safety. I even stopped by the bakery on Main Street to grab my mom's favorite lemon bars. But when I pulled up to the driveway, my world stopped. The house, our house, had a different car parked out front. The shutters were painted a color I didn't recognize, and a plastic tricycle sat on the porch. For a second, I thought maybe I'd made a wrong turn. Then a little girl opened the door barefoot, holding a sippy cup, and called, "Mommy, there's a man outside." A woman I'd never seen before came out, smiling politely. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I think there's been a mistake," I stammered. "This is my parents' house," she frowned. "I'm sorry, sir. We bought this place about 4 months ago." My hands went numb. I stood there, holding that stupid box of lemon bars. Watching the door close on 29 years of my life, I called my parents immediately, my voice shaking. "Mom, why is someone else living in our house?" There was a pause long enough for my heart to drop. Then she sighed, "Oh, honey, we sold it. We needed the money. You've been busy. We didn't want to bother you." I remember sitting in my car, staring at the house as her words sank in. They'd sold the one place that held every memory I ever had, and they hadn't even told me. That was the first time I realized my parents could betray me. Without even blinking, the next few days felt like sleepwalking through a bad dream. I couldn't shake the image of that little girl playing in what used to be my front yard, the same patch of grass where my dad taught me how to throw a baseball. My parents' silence only made it worse. Every unanswered call, every deflection chipped away at something inside me. Finally, I drove back to the city clerk's office and pulled the public property records, and there it was, in black and white. The sale had gone through 3 months ago. The buyer's name wasn't some random stranger. It was Karen McMillan, my mom's best friend. My stomach twisted. They hadn't sold the house to strangers, they'd sold it to someone they knew. And not just that, they'd undersold it. The house was worth nearly double what Karen paid. I felt my pulse hammering as I scrolled through the documents. This wasn't desperation. It was deceit. I called my mom again that night. She finally picked up, her voice clipped. "Mom, why didn't you tell me? You sold it for half its value to Karen?" "Oh, don't start," she snapped. "You don't understand how hard things have been. We needed fast cash. Karen was helping us out." "Helping," I said, barely containing my anger. You practically gave her the house." My dad's voice chimed in faintly from the background. "Enough, son. It's just a house. You're too emotional about this. Just a house." Those words felt like a punch. They'd always taught me that family meant loyalty, that we stuck together no matter what. Yet here they were, selling the very symbol of our family behind my back like it was some old furniture. That night, as I stared at the property papers spread across my table, one thought echoed in my mind. If they could sell our home this easily, what else had they lied about? After that call, something in me cracked. I stopped picking up when they rang, stopped sending money, stopped pretending everything was fine. But the silence was worse than the anger it echoed. Nights stretched long and sleepless. I'd sit at my kitchen table, staring at old photos of the house, Christmas mornings by the fireplace. My dad's old recliner, the faded wallpaper Mom swore she'd replace but never did. It felt like a death I wasn't allowed to mourn. Still, guilt crept in. That's how family conditioning works. You're taught to forgive, even when you're the one bleeding. My mind whispered excuses. They were desperate. They didn't mean to hurt you. They're your parents. But my heart knew better. Love shouldn't feel like emotional blackmail. Weeks passed before I heard from them again. My mom texted, "You've changed, sweetheart. We did what we had to. Stop holding grudges." The audacity stunned me. One typed out a dozen replies, angry, hurt, sarcastic, but deleted every one. I couldn't find words big enough to hold what I felt. Then came the family gossip. My aunt called, saying your mom's upset. She says you're being cruel for not applauding the people who'd sold my childhood for pennies. It was surreal watching the narrative twist. Like they were the victims, and I was the ungrateful son. One night, out of sheer masochism, I checked the house listing again, just to torture myself. That's when I noticed something strange. The property record had been updated, pending resale, it turned out Karen, my mom's friend, couldn't keep up with the mortgage. She was planning to sell, for the first time in months. I felt something shift. Not hope exactly, but purpose. If the house was going back on the market, maybe fate was handing me a chance to make things right. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing flashes of my dad's dismissive tone. "It's just a house." Those words looped like static in my head. Maybe to them it was just walls and a roof, but to me, it was every piece of who I used to be. And now, somehow, it was slipping back into reach. The next morning, I called a realtor under a fake name, Daniel Hart. My voice shook when I said, "I heard the McMillan property might be going on the market again." The realtor confirmed it. Karen was behind on payments and looking to sell quietly. I thanked her, hung up, and just sat there grinning at my computer screen. For the first time in months, I wasn't powerless. Over the next few weeks, I started working the plan. I set up a small LLC, hired a real estate lawyer, and used my savings, plus the small inheritance my grandfather left me to make a cash offer. No financing. No paper trail that could link back to me. Every step was clean, deliberate, and cold. My lawyer asked, "You sure about this?" "You sound like you're buying more than a house." I smiled. "I am." When the deal closed, I drove back to that quiet street. The lawn was overgrown, the paint peeling, but it was still mine. I walked up to the porch and rested my hand on the railing. It felt like shaking hands with a ghost. The irony didn't hit until later that night. My parents had sold my childhood home behind my back, and now I'd bought it back behind theirs. But life wasn't done playing games with me yet, because a few weeks later, I got a call from the property manager, and his words made my heart stop. "Just letting you know," he said, "the new tenants are moving in next week. A nice older couple, named Mr. and Mrs. Taylor." My parents, when I heard the property manager say their names, I thought he was joking. "Mr. and Mrs. Taylor," he repeated cheerfully, unaware of the knife twisting in my chest. My parents had just rented my house, the same one they'd sold behind my back. I remember gripping my phone, stunned into silence. He continued, "They said they used to live there years ago. Real sweet couple." I figured it'd be kind of poetic, them coming back. Poetic. That word nearly made me laugh out loud. Poetic wasn't the word for it. I felt a sick mix of irony and rage bubbling inside me. My parents had managed to crawl their way right back into the home they'd betrayed me over. They were paying me rent to do it. I could have called them. I could have screamed, exposed everything, demanded an explanation. But instead, I made a different choice. Silence. I wanted them to live there under the illusion that some faceless landlord was collecting their checks. I wanted them to feel comfortable, oblivious, secure. Because comfort is what makes people careless. Over the next few weeks, I set up a property management company to handle everything. All communication went through them. I stayed invisible, the quiet puppeteer behind the curtain. My parents even bragged to my aunt that the new landlord seems reasonable. I almost laughed when I heard it. Every month, the rent hit my account. Every dollar they paid felt like poetic repayment, not for the house, but for every year they made me feel small for caring too much. Still, part of me wondered how long I could keep it up. Secrets have weight, and mine was starting to feel heavy. But I wasn't done yet. I had a plan, one they'd never see coming, and for the first time in my life, I held all the power. Weeks turned into months, and my parents settled comfortably into their old new home. From what the property manager told me, they were thrilled repainting rooms, planting flowers, even hosting Sunday dinners like old times. I'd see pictures through family group chats, pretending to smile at the irony. My mom texted once, "You should come by sometime, sweetheart." It almost feels like the old days again. Stared at that message for hours, fingers hovering over the keyboard before finally replying. Maybe soon. Every time I sent that rent receipt to my lawyer, a strange satisfaction pulsed through me. They were paying me unknowingly to live in the house they'd stolen from me. It was like poetic justice written in mortgage form. Still, I didn't gloat. I kept my distance. When my mom called, I kept my voice calm and brief, letting her think I was busy with work. My dad sometimes joined the call, cracking his old jokes. "You should visit," he'd say. "We'll make your favorite barbecue." It was eerie, pretending everything was fine while I controlled the roof over their heads. But beneath that calm surface, I was studying them. Every late payment notice, every complaint about the landlord raising the rent became part of my quiet revenge. They had no idea they're sweet. Faceless landlord was the son they'd once dismissed as too emotional. One afternoon, a property manager mentioned casually they're struggling with the rent a bit. Might need to downsize if it keeps up. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, feeling something cold and unfamiliar settle over me. It wasn't joy, not even anger anymore. It was control. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the son trying to please them. I was the man deciding their future, and that realization was both empowering and terrifying. It started with a missed payment, then another. The property manager sent polite reminders, and my parents gave excuse after excuse: bank delays, unexpected bills, a medical emergency. Every line sounded rehearsed, like the same lies I used to tell my landlord years ago when I was broke and young. But this time, I wasn't the one apologizing. I was the one holding the contract. One evening, my mom called out of the blue. Her voice was soft, fragile. "Honey, things have been tough lately. Your dad's hours got cut, and I hate to ask, but do you think you could help out with rent for a couple of months?" I froze. The irony was almost too much to process. She was asking me to pay me. I forced my tone to stay even. "I've got a lot on my plate, Mom. Maybe talk to your landlord about an extension." She sighed, disappointment dripping from every word. "You've really changed." If only she knew how right she was. A week later, my aunt texted me, "Your mom's been crying. Says you're ignoring them while they're losing the house." So the narrative was shifting again. Me, the cold son. Them, the victims. I didn't bother correcting her. Let them play their parts. I'd stopped auditioning for Good Son long ago, but then late one night I drove by the house. The lights were on, through the window. I saw my dad sitting in his recliner, the same spot he used to read the newspaper every morning when I was a kid. He looked smaller now, tired, older, and for a moment, guilt punched through the armor I'd built. I sat there in the dark, engine off. torn between pity and vindication. Then my eyes caught the lease ends. 30 days. Note in the window, taped there by the property manager, 30 days, and I knew exactly what I was going to do when that lease expired. The countdown to the lease's end felt like a fuse burning slowly in the dark. Each passing day tightened something in my chest. I thought I'd feel satisfaction, maybe even triumph, watching everything fold back on them. But what I felt was heavier, murkier. Revenge doesn't feel clean when it's against your own blood. Then came the family dinner. My cousin had invited everyone for her engagement, and for the first time in months, I saw my parents face to face. They were dressed nicely, smiling for the crowd, playing the part of proud parents. When someone asked how retirement was treating them, my mom laughed and said, "We've had some bumps, but we'll manage." Our son doesn't help much, though. The laughter that followed was light, harmless to everyone but me. I felt my stomach twist as my dad chimed in. "He's too busy for family now." You know how success changes people. It was like being publicly erased. The years of sacrifice, the money I'd sent, the trust I'd given, gone with a smirk. I left early, pretending to take a call, but the truth was I couldn't breathe. I sat in my car, parked outside that glowing restaurant, staring at my reflection in the windshield. For the first time, I wondered if I'd become what they said, cold, distant, hardened. When I got home, I poured a drink and opened the rent portal. There it was, another missed payment notice. My lawyer's automatic message had already been sent. Final notice before eviction. I should have felt powerful, but all I felt was hollow, because no matter how much control I had, I was still that kid wanting his parents to love him, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. That night, I sat in the dark, phone in hand, debating whether to cancel the eviction process. But then I remembered. Standing outside that house months ago, the strangers, child calling for her mother, and how my parents hadn't even warned me, and that memory hardened my resolve. This time, I wouldn't be the one left outside. The 30 days passed faster than I expected. When the final notice went unanswered, my lawyer reminded me if they don't vacate by Friday, we proceed. My hand trembled slightly as I signed the papers, a mix of nerves, anger, and something darker. Anticipation. This wasn't just business. This was the moment everything turned full circle. That Friday, I drove to the house myself. It felt strange walking up the same steps where I once sat carving my initials into the railing. The flowers they'd planted had already wilted. The windows were shut tight, curtains drawn. I knocked once. Then again, my father opened the door. For a moment, time folded in on itself. His shocked face, my reflection in the glass behind him, the decades of unspoken resentment hanging between us. Double quote, "Son, what are you doing here?" he asked, confusion spreading. I took a slow breath. "I'm here for business." Mom appeared behind him, clutching her cardigan. "Business," she echoed. I handed them the envelope, the official eviction notice, stamped and final. My mother's hands trembled as she read it. "There must be some mistake," she whispered. "No mistake," I said quietly. "You're renting this house from my company, and I'm the owner." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush the air between us. My dad's face went pale. "You bought it?" "I bought it back," I corrected, my voice steady. "Under a different name." "The same house you sold without telling me?" My mom's eyes filled with tears. "Why would you do this to us?" I looked at her, heart pounding but calm. "Because you did it to me first." They didn't yell. They didn't beg. They just stood there, small, stunned, realizing that for once, they weren't in control. As I turned to leave, I heard my father whisper, "You're not the son I raised." I didn't look back. "You're right," I said. "You sold him years ago." The days after the eviction were eerily quiet. I expected rage, angry calls, threats, guilt trips, but what came instead was silence. My lawyer confirmed they'd left without a scene. The keys were dropped off at the office in a plain envelope. No note, no explanation, just absence. When I finally drove back to the house, it felt smaller than I remembered. Dust motes floated through the sunlight, seeping in from half-open blinds. The rooms were bare, but I could still trace their lives in the spaces they'd left behind, the faint outlines of furniture. A nail hole where my childhood photos once hung. In the kitchen, I found an old mug chipped at the rim. My dad's. I held it for a moment, unsure whether to keep it or throw it away. They'd humiliated me, lied to me, and erased my trust. But standing there, I didn't feel victorious. I felt like I'd buried something instead of reclaiming it. My revenge had been methodical, perfect, but revenge doesn't fill the void left by betrayal. It just silences it. The neighbors noticed me through the window. Mrs. Carter from next door waved, smiling cautiously. "Glad to see the house back in the family," she said. I smiled back, but the word family felt like salt on a wound. That night, I sat on the porch, the same spot where my mom used to hum while watering her plants, and listened to the crickets. The air smelled like rain and nostalgia. I realized then that justice wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, lonely, necessary. When people talk about closure, you never mention how heavy it feels. But as I locked the door behind me, I finally understood. Sometimes closure means walking away, even when the ghosts still live inside. Months passed, and the house slowly transformed from a monument of pain into something living again. I hired a small crew to restore it. Fresh paint, new flooring, a rebuilt porch, but I handled the final touches myself. I sanded the old railing where my initials were carved, the same one I'd leaned on during childhood summers. As I ran my hand over the grooves, it felt like shaking hands with the version of me that once believed love and loyalty were the same thing. Neighbors would stop by. "You're starting over?" they'd ask. I'd nod and smile. But the truth was deeper. I wasn't rebuilding a house. I was rebuilding myself. Every room carried echoes. The dining room where my parents fought behind closed doors. The kitchen where my mom taught me to make pancakes. The hallway where my dad once told me, "A man's home is his foundation." I'd believed that. I still did, but now the foundation was mine alone. One evening, I stood in the backyard as the sun dipped below the fence line. The grass had grown tall again, brushing against my jeans, just like when I was a kid burying my dog under the oak tree. I whispered almost to the wind, "I'm home." There was no grand ending, no dramatic music, no applause. Just peace, the kind that comes when you stop waiting for someone else to make things right. I didn't tell my parents I owned the house again. They'd find out someday, maybe through a rumor or a quiet whisper in town. But by then it wouldn't matter. The story wasn't about them anymore. It was about learning that sometimes the only way to honor your past is to take it back, piece by piece, and make it yours again. I locked the door that night and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not revenge, not triumph, but freedom. And for the first time in my life, that felt like home.